On May 15th, Jerome Powell's term as Fed chairman is set to expire. Now, Powell has promised to stay on the job as chairman pro tem until a successor is confirmed, saying that is what the law calls for. But in a new interview that aired today on Fox Business, President Donald Trump was asked what would happen if Powell does stay.
I don't have to fire him, okay? If he's not leaving on time, I've held back firing him. I've wanted to fire him, but I hate to be controversial, you know?
It is not clear whether Trump has the authority to fire Powell. He's considered it and been dissuaded from doing so because of that lack of authority many times in the past. And Powell also has the option to remain on the Fed board because his chairmanship ends in May, but his Fed governor's seat actually isn't up until 2028. Now, if that wasn't complicated enough, here's what really makes it all complicated. The Justice Department's criminal investigation into Powell is centered on accusations that he lied to Congress last year about the Fed's $2.5 billion renovation of its headquarters. It followed Trump's repeated criticism of Powell, and Powell has strongly rebuked the investigation, calling it politicized. Earlier this month, a federal judge blocked subpoenas from the Justice Department, saying the investigation appeared to be a political vendetta. That, however, has not stopped the Justice Department from trying to keep the probe going. In fact, just yesterday, 2 federal prosecutors showed up at the Fed's headquarters asking for a tour of the renovation site. The building contractor turned them away, referring them to Fed attorneys. Now, Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina posted a picture of the Three Stooges and wrote the U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. at the crime scene. And while that's very interesting because it's a Republican criticizing the Trump administration in real time, what makes it far more interesting is Tillis has said if the investigation is not dropped, he will hold up the confirmation of Kevin Warsh, Trump's replacement, for Powell. Today, Senate Majority Leader John Thune appears to be able to count and know that without Tillis, this can't go anywhere. This is what he told CNN.
At some point, they're going to have to deal with the committee, and they're going to have to deal with Tillis. And I think it's in everybody's best interest to wrap up the investigation.
Let's bring in the panel. CNN Chief Legal Affairs Correspondent Paula Reed, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree, and former federal prosecutor Brendan Ballou, founder of the Public Integrity Project. Okay, Paula.
Yes.
This investigation, subpoenas were quashed. Jeanine Pirro, who's running it from the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, said they're going to appeal. They want to keep this going. Obviously, 2 of her people showed up at the Fed yesterday unsuccessfully. What's happening here?
Look, this investigation is ongoing, and it will continue because there's an open Attorney General seat currently. Now it's being occupied by Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, but there are a few folks who are hoping he's just kind of keeping it warm that they too might be considered. And Jeanine Pirro is one of those people who appears at least to maybe be auditioning for that job. And what's interesting about those subpoenas is the day they were quashed. Usually, if a judge quashes your subpoenas, maybe you're a little embarrassed, but you could always appeal. The woman held a press conference, and at the time I called it an audition for the job of Attorney General. Pam Bondi was still in that post, but she's proving to the boss, to the president, that she is going to fight. Obviously, he is upset with Jerome Powell. This is the kind of investigation that he wants to see. Even if it won't ultimately be successful, even if it's criticized as being clearly political, this will continue because this is how you get promoted in the Trump administration.
You unflinchingly, we were on air together after that press conference, and that was the first thing you went to, and I was like, all right. Well,
covered DOJ for a decade. I'm just calling it like I see it.
Knows her stuff. She's just saying what is very obviously the case. Tom, I think beyond the biggest own goal in the history of ever. Kevin Warsh has, I want to be very clear about this. Kevin Warsh has a majority of Republican support to be confirmed. And he could be confirmed before Powell's term is up if this investigation goes away. I'm trying to think through why there isn't somebody or something causing the administration to say, hey, let's let this one go.
Yeah, there may be wiser heads, cooler heads working behind the scene to try to reach some sort of resolution. Because to your point, it does seem like there would be a pathway for allowing Warsh to come in, take over from Powell, and the investigation goes away and everything is wrapped up. But I do think that's what's driving this, is the president has made abundantly clear that he does not want to abandon this potential prosecution of Powell. That was the reason Pam Bondi got fired. That was a message that resonated loud and clear throughout the Justice Department, that if you want to keep your job, if you want to ascend to a new job, you've got to get results. And in President Trump's ledger, getting results means achieving the prosecution of his political enemies.
You know, another result is having Kevin Warsh as Fed chair on May 16th, which they could get if they dropped the prosecution.
It could all
I
come
feel like I just
together.
keep saying this. I'm like, someone has to be connecting these dots here. One of the questions that I've had is, look, there's a Supreme case being considered right now with Lisa Cook, a Fed governor who the president tried to fire. We watched the arguments together, or listened to the arguments together live when they happened. The conservative justices were just as skeptical, I think, of the administration's view on this as the Democratic appointees were. The authority to fire the Fed chair, does he have it?
No. So, as you said, they have already tried this as a test run in trying to fire Lisa Cook. The statute is very clear. You need to be fired for cause, and that cause needs to be related to what your actual job responsibilities are. There's absolutely nothing in this investigation so far that has revealed that Jerome Powell is in any way derelict in his duties. If I could just add one thing as a former prosecutor here, this is inept on so many levels. We've touched on some of these. But one of the last people that you want at the site of an investigation typically is an actual prosecutor. What you normally want is the FBI to be there. And actually having Jeanine Pirro send DOJ AUSAs, assistant U.S. attorneys, instead of FBI agents, or not only FBI agents, means that those prosecutors could become fact witnesses in any future investigation. So, any defense lawyer is going to be calling them as a witness, trying to get their emails and so forth. So, you said this is an audition for Attorney General. It seems to be, at least on a legal level, a very inept one.
Yeah.
And also, those were the same two AUSAs who were sending emails to the Fed over the Christmas holiday that sparked the subpoenas, because this whole thing is kind of bonkers. You mentioned Pam Bondi.
Yes.
Switching gears a little bit here, but the House Oversight Committee Democrats are pushing to hold Bondi in contempt for dodging her subpoena on the Epstein issue. Could this actually get her to testify now that she's gone?
Look, it's unclear.
Is she gone?
Yes, she is no longer
Okay.
the Attorney General. Todd Blanche has moved into her office. There's a little bit of transition that has to happen, but physically, spiritually, Todd Blanche is running the Justice Department and auditioning for this job. Now, the question here is, what do you want to achieve on the Hill, right? I was up there when Todd and Pam both went to try to, I think, stave off this subpoena. They talked to lawmakers behind closed doors. Democrats didn't ask any questions. They said they only wanted to ask questions of her in a sworn deposition that would be released to the public. Republicans asked some questions, but the idea of contempt is getting sort of a mixed reaction from Democrats. So what do they want to do? Is it probably worth it to get Pam Bondi to answer some questions about what the hell happened over the last year and a half when it comes to the Epstein files? Yeah, that's probably great for the historical record. But when we talk about victims and getting answers for them about what is going on at DOJ, what is next, what else can we get? They've already told us there aren't any current criminal open investigations. The person who can probably best answer those questions is Todd Blanche, because he oversaw the review of those documents. He's currently in charge of the Justice Department. Will Republicans want to subpoena him? It remains to be seen. But at this point, they need to decide what exactly they want to do. Do you just want to cause trouble for the administration? Do you want to show your constituents that you care about these victims and you're not going to let powerful people get away with this? You need to make a political calculus here about your next step.
Yeah, it's a really important point. I actually want to ask both of you about this because the Justice Department is moving to dismiss the January 6th related seditious conspiracy convictions of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. They are, of course, the only people who still face charges for the Capitol riot, given Trump pardoned literally everybody else. Tom, just to start with you, kind of your reaction to this move.
Well, I'm not shocked. The president has signaled that he thinks these people have been treated unfairly, and he also has not hesitated to direct the Justice Department to take whatever steps he deems appropriate to either vacate convictions, drop pending prosecutions, and the like. But look, I will say, as someone who generally respects the rule of law, that what's really being questioned here by the Justice Department is not the judgment of Biden-era prosecutors, but frankly, the judgment of jurors and judges, dozens of them, hundreds of them, throughout the system, who all looked at these cases, who looked at the evidence, who looked at the facts, rendered convictions, and then those convictions were passed upon, in most cases, if not all cases, by a federal judge. So I don't think it's quite right to say that these were all political vendetta prosecutions. These were tested, they were means tested by the judges, by the juries, and so to set them all aside doesn't sit right with me.
Brennan?
I spent 2 years being on the team that prosecuted January 6 rioters. I was a very small part of that team. There were a lot of us involved, but to see this is obviously horrifying, and I think it lays the foundation for more extreme acts. One is the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers trying to sue the government for monetary damages, which would be a great way for the Trump administration to essentially fund paramilitary and militia organizations that are allied to him, but beyond the reach of the law. I think it also is part of a broader effort to rewrite the history of January 6th for a very specific reason, which is that if Donald Trump is able to get people to either forget about January 6th or worse yet, condone January 6th, then he knows he's going to be able to convince people to accept any attack on democracy. So this isn't just about the past, it's about the future.
Brendan, Tom, Paula, man, you guys, there's a lot going on in your world, so I appreciate you guys very much.